Empaths are people who experience emotions with great intensity. They pick up on the moods, energies, and unspoken pain of those around them. While this sensitivity is a remarkable strength, it can also become a quiet weight to carry. When an empath is hurt repeatedly, every emotional injury leaves an imprint not only on the heart but also on the mind and sense of self. Over time, something significant begins to shift within them. Their inner world gradually changes. What once appeared as pure softness can grow into wisdom, clear boundaries, and emotional resilience. An empath naturally takes in the emotions of others. They do not just listen to someone's pain, they feel it deeply. When someone is upset, angry, or struggling, the empath's mind and body respond almost immediately. Their heart feels heavy, their thoughts begin to race, and they feel a strong pull to help soothe or fix the situation. In supportive environments, this sensitivity can lead to meaningful connections. However, when an empath is hurt over and over, their internal emotional system begins to operate in a constant state of overload. Each painful experience adds another layer of emotional strain. Because empaths tend to reflect deeply, they revisit conversations and situations long after they are over. They go over every word, every tone, every detail, trying to understand what they may have done wrong or how things could have been handled differently. This pattern of deep reflection can gradually turn into mental fatigue. The empath is not only carrying the pain of the moment, but also the lingering emotional echoes that follow. Over time, their mind becomes filled with unresolved emotions. Empaths rarely let go of feelings quickly. Instead, they hold them quietly within. When pain occurs repeatedly, the emotional weight continues to build. It begins to feel as though their mind never truly relaxes. Even in moments of quiet or solitude, their thoughts keep returning to past conflicts, disappointments, and misunderstandings. This ongoing interactivity drains their energy in ways others may not see. The body also reacts to this emotional strain. Many empaths experience physical symptoms of stress such as exhaustion, tightness, headaches, or trouble sleeping. Their nervous system remains on edge because they are constantly expecting emotional tension or disappointment. Even minor negative interactions can spark strong internal reactions, as the empath's emotional capacity is already pushed to its limits. Another difficulty during this time is the empath's tendency to place blame on themselves. Because they are naturally reflective and caring, they often take responsibility for emotional issues in relationships. Instead of quickly recognizing unhealthy behavior in others, they first turn inward. They question whether they were too sensitive, too demanding, or not understanding enough. This constant self-examination adds to their emotional fatigue, as they are always trying to adjust themselves to preserve peace. Meanwhile, the empath continues to offer emotional support to others. They listen, comfort, encourage, and remain patient even when their own emotional energy is running low. This imbalance creates an inner struggle. One part of them feels exhausted and overwhelmed, while another part feels guilty for even considering stepping back. Their compassionate nature urges them to keep giving even when they deeply need space. Eventually, the empath begins to experience a quiet but intense sense of burnout. The emotional generosity that once felt natural now feels heavy and draining. They may find themselves pulling away from conversations or needing more time alone to restore their energy. The mind that once focused mainly on understanding others slowly begins to seek peace and relief from constant emotional pressure. Ongoing emotional pain gradually leads to a deep shift within the empath's mind. At first, they may respond as they always have, trying harder, offering more patience, and giving even more understanding. They believe that loving more deeply or communicating more clearly will improve things. But as the same cycles of hurt continue, something within them begins to question everything. The empath's natural awareness of emotions starts turning inward. Instead of focusing only on others' feelings, they begin to notice their own experiences. They recognize how often they feel drained after certain interactions, how some people consistently leave them feeling confused or unvalued, and how their efforts to maintain peace are rarely matched. These realizations slowly awaken a strong sense of self-awareness. This awareness does not come all at once, it develops slowly through reflection and emotional awareness. The empath begins linking past experiences, noticing that many painful situations follow similar patterns. They start to realize that they are often the one who apologizes first, the one who makes sacrifices, or the one who tries to repair emotional damage after conflicts. Over time, these insights create a clearer understanding of their role in relationships. With this deeper awareness comes a mix of emotions. The empath may feel sadness as they see how often their kindness has been overlooked. They may feel frustration as they recognize how many times they set aside their own needs to keep others comfortable. At moments, they may even feel anger, not only toward others, but also toward themselves for allowing these patterns to continue for so long. Although these emotions can feel intense, they play an important role in the empath's inner transformation. During this stage, the empath's perspective begins to shift in quiet yet powerful ways. Instead of automatically blaming themselves for every emotional conflict, they begin to observe the behavior of others more closely. They start asking whether the relationship is balanced, whether their efforts are appreciated, and whether their emotional energy is respected. These questions mark a turning point in their personal growth. The empath also becomes more aware of how their empathy has shaped their decisions. They may realize that their desire to understand others has sometimes led them to tolerate disrespect or emotional manipulation. Because they could see someone else's pain or struggles, they ignored their own discomfort and kept giving chances that were never truly deserved. Recognizing this pattern can be painful, but it also deepens their self-understanding. As this awareness grows, the empath begins building a stronger connection with their inner voice. They start paying attention to the subtle feelings they once ignored, the moments when something felt off, the quiet signals of emotional discomfort, and the instinct that certain situations were unhealthy. Rather than dismissing these feelings, they begin to treat them as valuable guidance. This stage marks the beginning of a deep internal awakening. The empath's emotional intelligence, once focused mostly on others, begins to turn inward. They start learning not only how to understand people, but also how to understand themselves, their limits, and their emotional needs. As this awareness strengthens, a quiet realization takes shape. Constantly giving without limits has come at a significant personal cost. For much of their life, the empath may have believed that love meant endless patience, endless understanding, and constant emotional availability. They often allowed others to rely on them at any time, believing that being supportive meant never turning anyone away. But repeated emotional pain slowly reshapes this belief. The empath begins to understand that caring for others should not come at the expense of themselves. This realization becomes the foundation for developing emotional boundaries. At first, the idea of boundaries may feel unfamiliar or even uncomfortable. Their natural instinct has always been to accommodate others, maintain harmony, and avoid actions that might make someone feel rejected. Because of this, setting limits can feel cold or unkind. Even when those limits are completely reasonable, there is often an internal struggle. During this stage, one part of them still wants to respond with the same compassion and availability they have always offered. Another part, however, feels exhausted from repeated emotional pain. This second voice begins reminding them that their energy matters and that constant self-sacrifice is not sustainable. Over time, this inner voice becomes stronger. The empath begins noticing situations where their emotional generosity is being stretched too far. They may see how certain people only reach out when they need something, but rarely offer support in return. They begin to notice how some conversations revolve entirely around another person's problems, while their own struggles go unheard. These realizations gradually strengthen the empath's resolve to protect their emotional space. As boundaries begin to form, the empath slowly changes how they respond to others. Instead of immediately trying to fix every problem or absorb every emotional burden, they begin creating space between themselves and the situation. They may take more time to respond to messages, step away from conversations when they feel drained, or choose not to engage in conflicts that once consumed them. These small choices reflect meaningful inner. Learning to say no becomes one of the most powerful changes during this stage. For many empaths, the word no once felt nearly impossible because they feared disappointing others or creating tension. But as they continue practicing self-respect, they begin to understand that saying no is not rejection. It is balance. It allows them to preserve their energy and protect the compassion that truly matters to them. This process also helps the empath become more selective about where they invest their emotional energy. Instead of offering empathy everywhere, they begin directing it toward relationships that are supportive, respectful, and mutual. They come to recognize that genuine connections do not require constant sacrifice. Healthy relationships allow empathy to flow both ways. As these boundaries grow stronger, the empath begins to notice a steady shift in their emotional balance. Situations that once felt overwhelming no longer carry the same weight. They feel less pressure to manage everyone else's emotions and more at ease, focusing on their own well-being. Their compassion is still present, but it is now supported by a deeper sense of self-respect and emotional clarity. After facing repeated, many empaths start developing a quiet yet powerful form of self-protection known as emotional detachment. This change does not happen all at once. It develops gradually as the empath becomes more aware of how deeply they have been affected by constantly absorbing the emotions, struggles, and conflicts of others. Over time, their mind begins seeking a way to maintain inner peace while still preserving their caring nature. In the past, the empath may have reacted instantly to every emotional signal around them. If someone was upset, they felt responsible for helping. If someone was angry, they absorbed that tension into their own body. If someone was struggling, they stepped in without hesitation to share the burden. This constant emotional involvement once felt natural. However, repeated hurt teaches the empath that reacting so strongly to everything can slowly drain their inner stability. As this understanding deepens, the empath begins to change how they process emotional interactions. Instead of immediately taking in another person's feelings, they start observing them more thoughtfully. They listen, but no longer feel the need to fix everything right away. They begin to understand that some emotions belong to others and are not theirs to carry. This shift creates a small but meaningful distance between the empath's inner world and the emotional chaos around them. This form of detachment is not about becoming cold or uncaring. The empath still feels deeply and continues to care about others. What changes is the level of intensity with which they allow those emotions to enter their inner space. Rather than letting every conflict or negative feeling take over their thoughts and energy, they begin allowing emotions to pass without fully absorbing them. During this stage, the empath's responses become calmer and more measured. Situations that once triggered immediate reactions are now approached with greater awareness. Instead of being overwhelmed by someone else's anger or sadness, they pause and reflect before responding. This pause creates emotional space, helping them remain steady even when others are not. Another key shift is the empath's growing acceptance that they cannot save everyone. Earlier in life, they may have believed that with enough patience, understanding, and care, they could help others heal. But repeated experiences of being hurt or taken for granted gradually reshape this belief. The empath begins to recognize that each person must take responsibility for their own growth and actions. This realization encourages them to step back from situations that once consumed their energy. They may stop trying to resolve every conflict or fix every problem placed before them. Instead, they focus on maintaining their own stability. They learn that protecting their inner peace allows them to stay compassionate without becoming emotionally drained. Over time, this detachment strengthens the empath's resilience. Their empathy remains, but it is no longer overwhelming or uncontrolled. They become capable of understanding others while maintaining clear boundaries between their own emotions and those around them. Now, as the empath continues moving through cycles of emotional pain and self-reflection, their compassion begins to mature into something deeper and more refined. In earlier stages of life, empathy often meant giving freely and trusting without hesitation. They believed that understanding someone's pain was enough to justify patience, forgiveness, and repeated chances. Their compassion was genuine, but it was often guided more by feeling than by clarity. Repeated hurt gradually transforms this. The empath still senses the emotions of others, but their experiences begin teaching them valuable lessons about human behavior. They start to see that not every expression of pain comes from a place of sincerity. Some people seek empathy, while others rely on the empath's kindness without taking responsibility for their own actions. These insights slowly reshape how the empath uses their compassion. Empathy begins to blend with awareness. Instead of immediately offering unlimited emotional support, the empath starts observing patterns more carefully. They notice when apologies are repeated without real change, when promises are made but not kept, or when vulnerability is used to justify harmful behavior. Their ability to read emotions becomes sharper, allowing them to recognize both sincerity and manipulation with greater clarity. This stage often brings a powerful change in how the empath interprets people's actions. In the past, they may have focused only on understanding why someone behaved in a hurtful way. When someone behaved harshly, the empath would search for the hidden pain behind that behavior and respond with compassion. While this understanding still remains, the empath now balances it with a stronger awareness of personal responsibility. They realize that a person's struggles may explain their actions, but they do not excuse repeated harm. Through these experiences, the empath's emotional intelligence deepens in meaningful ways. They learn to recognize subtle signals in communication, shifts in tone, inconsistencies in behavior, and emotional patterns that once went unnoticed. Their mind becomes more skilled at evaluating whether a relationship is healthy, balanced, and respectful. This awareness allows them to approach interactions with greater confidence and clarity. Their compassion also becomes more intentional. Instead of offering their emotional energy everywhere, they begin directing it toward those who genuinely value and respect it. They understand that empathy is not meant to exist without limits. True compassion flourishes best in environments where it is appreciated and returned. Another important change is the empath's growing ability to trust their instincts. Over time, they build a stronger connection with their intuition, which often signals when something feels emotionally unsafe or insincere. In the past, they may have ignored these feelings in order to remain kind and understanding. Now, they treat those inner signals as important guidance rather than dismissing them. This transformation allows the empath to preserve their caring nature while becoming wiser about where they invest their emotional energy. Their kindness does not fade, but it becomes supported by insight, experience, and discernment. Compassion, once driven purely by emotion, now works alongside understanding, creating a more balanced and resilient inner strength. After moving through emotional exhaustion, self-awareness, boundaries, detachment, and growth, the empath eventually reaches a stage where a quiet yet powerful inner strength begins to form. This strength is not loud or forceful. Instead, it is calm, steady, and deeply rooted in self-awareness. The empath who once felt overwhelmed by repeated emotional pain gradually transforms into someone who understands their own worth and emotions with greater clarity. In the past, the empath may have depended heavily on the approval and emotional harmony of others. When relationships became tense or someone was upset with them, it created deep inner discomfort. They often tried to restore peace quickly, sometimes by apologizing even when they were not at fault or by sacrificing their own needs to keep the connection intact. Repeated emotional pain gradually reshapes this pattern. Through reflection and growth, the empath begins to understand that their value does not depend on keeping everyone satisfied. This realization strengthens their sense of identity. They become more confident in their feelings, decisions, and boundaries. Instead of constantly wondering whether they are too sensitive or too demanding, they begin trusting their emotional awareness. When something feels wrong or disrespectful, they acknowledge it rather than dismissing it. This self-trust creates a stable inner foundation that may not have existed before. Another significant shift occurs in how the empath responds to conflict and emotional pressure. In the past, manipulation, guilt, or criticism may have deeply affected them. They might have spent long periods worrying about how others viewed them, or trying to fix situations that were never truly their responsibility. As their inner strength grows, these influences begin to lose their hold. The empath becomes less reactive to emotional pressure because they can now see these behaviors with greater clarity. Their way of communicating also, instead of over-explaining themselves or trying to make others fully understand their perspective, they begin expressing their boundaries calmly and directly. They no longer feel the need to justify every decision or prove their kindness through constant emotional effort. This shift can surprise those around them, as the empath's quiet confidence replaces the constant accommodation that once defined them. At the same time, the empath develops a deeper appreciation for peace and emotional balance. They become more selective about the environments and relationships they allow into their life. Situations that once seemed normal, such as ongoing drama, emotional instability, or one-sided connections, begin to feel draining and unnecessary. Their focus shifts toward maintaining balance, authenticity, and meaningful relationships. What makes this stage especially powerful is that the empath's core nature remains unchanged. They still care deeply, still understand emotions, and still carry strong compassion. The difference is that their empathy is now guided by self-respect. They are no longer willing to lose themselves while supporting others. This inner transformation creates a quiet strength. The empath becomes someone who can remain kind without being controlled, supportive without becoming exhausted, and compassionate without being taken for granted. Their strength does not come from closing off their heart, but from finally understanding the importance of protecting it.